Welcome to the Microcast, the short-form podcast from Microcosm Coaching, where we break down the science, strategy, and psychology behind smarter endurance training. Each week, we tackle a key concept in running, training, or recovery, and we give you practical tools you can apply right away, whether you're building back, leveling up, or chasing down a big goal. We keep it short, evidence-based, and grounded in real coaching experience. No hype, no fluff, just actionable insights to help you train sustainably and perform at your best. Let's get into it.
If you're training for Boston this year, you already know this isn't just any marathon. Boston rewards runners who come prepared, who understand how to manage the downhills, the Newton Hills, and that final high-energy push down Boylston. That's why we created Run Your Best Marathon at Boston, a 4-part webinar series from Microcosm Coaching designed to help you nail every detail of race day. Across 4 expert-led sessions, we'll cover course strategy, how to pace the rolling terrain, avoid the trap of starting too fast, and use the course profile to your advantage, race fueling and hydration, what to eat, drink, and practice in training so you stay energized through Heartbreak Hill and beyond, mental prep and mindset training, how to stay steady when the race gets tough and harness the energy of those Boston crowds without burning out early. We'll also chat through taper and race week logistics, including everything from travel, nutrition, and recovery to what to do in those final days before the start in Hopkinton. Each session includes live Q&A with our coaching team, plus practical tools you can apply immediately in your training. Think downloadable pacing guides, fueling templates, and real-world examples from athletes who've been there. For less than the cost of a new pair of running shoes, you'll get pro-level guidance, a clear plan, and lifetime access to all recordings and resources. Whether you're chasing a Boston PR or just want to enjoy the day, this series will help you show up confident, prepared, and ready to run your best Boston ever. Spots are limited, so head to microcosmswag.com and sign up for Run Your Best Marathon at Boston today.
Welcome back.
We're back.
Back in the studio.
Back in the studio, back at my desk, my office.
Everything is yours.
Everything is mine.
Wow.
Thank
Your
you.
domain here.
It's my domain, my little micro kingdom,
Isn't that nice?
my sphere of influence.
Yes. Do you feel like when you're in your environment, you think, act, and work at a higher level?
Yes, because sometimes I try to work at the kitchen counter and I definitely feel less focused.
I can't work up there.
I feel very focused in my office. And if it's not extremely clean, but if it's like quite messy, I can't focus. And the carpet is starting to get to that place because this is also Bowie's office. So she sheds in here a lot.
There's that dog right now. Oops.
She's right beneath us.
Right there.
Yep. Shedding.
Well, it's fall. We're talking about how to make the most of our transition season and planning for the year ahead on today's call.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are taking a moment to step back and think like, how do I make the most of next year? So we're going to give some tips both on like in a tangible way, how to plan your race calendar. But really, if you were just like, okay, let's take a beat. What do I do to be the best runner possible next year? And really take a long-term view of your running career. Because I don't think enough people do that. So we're going to really get into some big picture stuff today.
Awesome. I think that's huge. And I don't want to get into any spoilers. So
No
maybe
spoilers.
we go right for our hot or not topics from the community for today.
Perfect.
Why don't you start us off?
All right. Trail runners using super shoes for flat workouts and weekday road runs.
I think it's hot.
I think it's hot, but I'm also like, okay, if you're a trail runner specific, I think it's fine for everyone.
Yeah.
As long as you don't have lower leg issues. If you have persistent, like if you have plantar issues or Achilles issues, or just like persistent, like issues of any kind because of the way
Mental,
that plates work,
emotional.
mental or emotional issues, dental issues. But like because of they can alter your biomechanics slightly. They are slightly more rigid. So some folks that have like lower leg issues, calf tightness, things like that, I would recommend avoiding those.
Yeah, I'm really into trail runners using super shoes. I don't see what the big deal is, especially for a lot of us. Like, I don't have time to go to the trails every day. I feel like I wish I did, but the honest, like, for most of my workouts, I kind of run from my house to the
Yeah.
trails. And I spend a lot of time on the roads, especially in the winter. So might as well use the shoes that make me feel the fastest
Yeah.
and feel really good and fun.
I will also say not everyone gets the same benefit from super shoes.
Right, it's
If
true.
you're running slower than a 9-minute mile, which is a lot of folks, you're going to get a little less benefit. Some people are super responders just because of their biomechanics, and some people will do better in specific shoes than others. So if you're like a newer runner, you probably don't need to rush out and buy a pair of super shoes. I think it's a nice thing to have. I think they're fun. I think it's a great way to put a little pep in your step. If you're someone who's going to race a road marathon or a half marathon, I would definitely recommend investing in them. But your mileage will really vary just depending on your individual physiology and how much energy you're actually putting into the shoe. Because if you're shuffling, the shoe's not going to make you shuffle any faster.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, so it seemed pretty unanimous. Not for the first time, but sometimes, it's not that unanimous between you and I. I think it's a definitive hot. Okay.
I had an athlete say that they admired that we saved our arguments for the podcast.
Our arguments?
I was like, do we really argue that much?
Do they have any idea what our actual relationship is like? Because it's pretty unhinged. No, I'm just kidding. We don't argue. I don't argue with at all, really.
We, especially not on coaching stuff. I feel like off the mic, we definitely have a culture of robust, not quite debate, but of, discussion of physiology. It's not uncommon for someone to bring a study to the dinner table or the breakfast table.
Yeah.
The spicy takes come out when you turn the mic on, I guess.
Well, you're much more willing to make a hot take than I am.
It's my whole job, dude.
I'm like, I could see your perspective on that. It's okay to feel what you feel.
I'm like, hell no, burn it down.
No, you can't feel that way. That is so not hot.
Not valid.
So let me get your take on this, because these two questions I think go hand in hand. I've got a bit of a follow-up on this. So having a shoe quiver, hot or not?
I'm going to say hot.
Okay.
Just because, I like to have, I don't have a quiver. I have, a shoe, moat.
You have, a shoe locker?
I have a shoe locker. Like a shoeseum.
You have too many shoes.
I have too many shoes. I need to get rid of some shoes. I used to be a professional gear tester, so it's hazards of the job. I do like shoes. I like having different shoes for different things. I think that sometimes people get sort of the pseudo-scientific idea that having different shoes is good for injury prevention. There's no actual study that shows that. Theoretically, yes, potentially having different shoes that have slightly different amounts of wear and different heel toe drop and different stack height would potentially just load your legs slightly differently.
It can shift the load around.
It can shift the load around. I don't feel comfortable saying that it prevents injury just because we don't have actual evidence of that. So I would say that a shoe quiver is a cool, good idea, but isn't is much more of a nice to have than a need to have. And as someone who cares about the planet, I also heartily do not endorse over-consuming products of any kind or buying things just for the heck of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I do think having a shoe quiver is pretty hot in a couple different instances. For one, if you're a trail runner who doesn't do all their runs on the trail because of time restraints and the logistics,
definitely get road shoes.
You should absolutely have a pair
Don't
of
wear
road
trail
shoes.
shoes on the road.
Yeah. I think, even if you're the kind of athlete who's running to the trails, if the majority of your run is on the road, really might want to consider just wearing a road shoe.
I would rather wear road shoes on the trail than trail shoes on the road.
I think that can really beat up the feet and the lower legs. And that's also my bias, just as a runner and somebody who trains a ton on the roads. And I see a lot of athletes do the same thing.
Because we live in Colorado. Every time I go to the gym, people are weightlifting, in trail shoes.
Right.
That is my
ultras.
pet peeve.
Come on, you can call it out.
I'll see people weightlifting and climbing approach shoes. It drives me absolutely nuts. Get shoes for the thing you're doing, or at least it feels like driving a golf cart in a swimming pool. It's just wrong.
I think it is worth it, honestly. Have a couple different pairs of shoes. Maybe you have your workout day shoe. Yeah. Maybe that's your carbon option. Then you've got your your faster non-technical trail shoe,
Uh-huh.
and then maybe you've got your like super cushy long run shoe, and maybe
Hmm.
you have your really cushy recovery run shoe. You
Yeah.
got 4 pairs of shoes.
Yeah.
And like over the course of the year, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of all those shoes, especially if you're following your training plan and you are, periodizing your training.
Yeah.
There's going to be moments for using all of those shoes, and it will make sense to have them all.
I'm going to drop in another little lukewarm take. So we're seeing shoes move into the usage of materials called supercritical foams.
Right.
What I'm seeing in practice, again, as a professional shoe tester, is that these supercritical foams don't last as long as like running shoes did maybe like 5-7 years ago.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing in my experience, and I've confirmed this with other folks who do this professionally, is that shoes are really lasting maybe like 200 to 400 miles, depending on how you use them, where you use them, and the specific make and model of the shoe. But I definitely, I would say getting 400 to 500 miles out of a shoe, which used to be standard when I started in the industry, would be exceptional. Now, the lifespan of a shoe is getting shorter. Shoes are also getting better. So there's clear trade-offs here, which I want people to keep in mind. But I say all of this to say that if you're wearing your shoes for 500, 600 miles, don't. I think that people are always tempted to kick the can down the road of getting a new pair of shoes. And yeah, shoes are getting more expensive. That is true. It's tough. That does mean the cost of your shoe per wear is going up slightly, but you're not going to save any money by running on a pair of blown out shoes and then, having lower leg issues. That can dramatically, or that can reasonably increase the risk of stress fractures, of lower leg injuries, stress reactions in your knees, and different biomechanical issues because different parts of the shoe wear out at different times. So not buying new shoes is not a good way to either save the planet, there's just more impactful. Again, don't overconsume.
Just
but
look at it as an investment in your health.
Correct.
And well-being as a runner and your longevity as a runner.
Yeah, and try to track the mileage on your shoes and just, again, be aware that the lifespan of a shoe, I believe and have seen confirmed elsewhere, is shortening.
Couldn't agree more. All right. This one is right up your alley, Zoe. I can't wait to hear you weigh in on this. Okay. This one came from the community. Fueling with olive oil during ultras.
No.
Is that cold? Is no
so cold? Stone cold pressed.
Apparently, Killian does this.
Yes, and you should never emulate what Killian does.
Just as a general rule of thumb.
Doing whatever a 110-pound Spaniard does. So what he, apparently was fueling with olive oil on his States of Elevation project. That's a really different undertaking than an ultra marathon in the first place. He is moving at such a low intensity that, again, I still wouldn't, if I was coaching a person who wanted to do this, I would still not recommend olive oil. I also think that there's this kind of perverted way that this picked up steam in the media because it's oh, pro runner drinks quirky fuel. The media is always obsessed with this runner eats a weird thing, and it almost sort of takes it out of a context where we're analyzing. We're sure, consuming fats as fuel can make more sense in this context. However, Killian, just throughout the course of his life, even a lot of folks have read The Uphill Athlete. Now, folks like me and other folks in the coaching industry have really pushed back against a lot of the ideas in that book because I and many others believe that it over prioritizes using fat as fuel and pushes people towards carbohydrate what we would now call carbohydrate periodization, or less euphemistically referred to as restriction, in order to incentivize a different type of substrate use. But we're seeing in the research that restricting your carbohydrates or just eating more fat while running doesn't actually improve your ability to call on that as your fuel source. What does improve your ability to call on that as your fuel source is just aerobic training. So Killian kind of has a history with some sort of off-kilter ideas about food and nutrition. And I, think I can also hold space for like, this might work really well for him. It clearly like did the trick this time. I can't believe he did this while he was wearing his little white speed suit at Western States because, dear God, taking in a lot of
I
fat
don't
while
think he
you're
was
running.
using olive oil during Western States.
I think he did use olive oil
2012.
didn't Scott Jurek at one point too?
I do know that Scott Jurek talked about it in his first
Yeah,
ultra
which,
running book, and he said he got bad GI distress
yes. Well,
from it, so
yeah.
decided not to use
So
it.
the facts are that you are in an ultra burning more fat. However, you are also still burning carbohydrates.
Well,
And your body only has so much ability to digest and metabolize fat.
and the point is to get better at burning onboard fat stores.
Yes.
And so it doesn't really make sense to try to add to those onboard stores. I think probably in the context, if I had to guess, and I haven't heard what Killian has said about this, but I would have guessed that because he was doing so much activity back to back to back for so many days,
It's just calories.
he was just trying to find ways to get really calorically dense foods
Yes.
in. Olive oil is a very calorically dense food.
Yep.
Also, oils probably go down a lot quicker than trying to eat a steak.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like he could
Well, because
potentially
he was putting it in flasks
right,
to
like he
take
could
out.
be sipping on that.
Yes.
And getting a lot of calories. He also, his metabolism, aerobic metabolism is a lot stronger than anyone who's listened to this podcast.
Yes.
Like, to be fair, like this is one of the fittest athletes in the world, has one of the highest VO2 maxes ever recorded. He has a different physiology. The layman is not going to be able to digest olive oil during, their Mount Massive hike.
Yeah. So I think the thing though that I want like us normies to walk away with is like, again, you are primarily using fat as your fuel source. You are still using carbohydrates. The mismatch comes in because you just can't digest and convert. Like fat is a much less efficient fuel source.
Right.
It takes your body way longer and is way more energy intensive and just has much more margin for error because it's more complex than a simple carbohydrate. So just forcing in, having some fat in a longer event could be productive. Like if you're doing a 100, maybe having like a little cookie snack or like some like a cracker with a bit of nut butter. Like again, you don't really want to go over more than 10 grams of protein or really like a few grams of fat, but there can be benefits to mixing up your macros much later in extremely long events. But I think that drinking an entire flask of olive oil for most of us mere mortals is way too much.
I'm going to go not hot on this.
But also happy for you, Killian.
Yes, good for you. Okay, here we go. Another food-related hot or not. Using candy instead of gels to fuel training and races. Hot or not?
So if you want to use it to fuel races, then you have to practice it in your training. I think the challenge here is like if you have trialed multiple fuel sources and candy works as well or better for you than other more traditional fuel sources like sports nutrition, great. They're honestly not crazy different in terms of just like that's a simple carbohydrate. However, a lot of times the way that candy, like Sour Patch Kids, like with the citric acid on top, sometimes there just are going to be like it is just hard to eat the amount of candy that you need to eat to get the energy that you need. And a lot like sports nutrition is formulated specifically for that use case. So oftentimes it contains other things that you need, like sodium, electrolytes, and caffeine. There's other points, like there's other things that are additionally useful in sports nutrition. So I think if you're training for a race, you need to be practicing what you plan on racing with. And a lot of times candy is just not going to be as effective a fuel source. I don't say that to stigmatize candy. I freaking love candy. And when I'm in my off season and I'm not training for a specific race to the point that candy can sustain the energy output that I want to have on my long runs, I eat candy, which is like just kind of like a fun every so often seasonal thing, or if I'm doing like an end of summer long run mountain adventure, like I love some candy, but people need to practice what they plan on racing with. And a lot of times candy is just not going to be as effective as a product that is made specifically for running.
Yeah, I would agree on that. And so therefore I would probably say that using candy instead of gels isn't that hot. I see a lot of people going for candy because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And sports nutrition is pretty expensive, especially the really good stuff. I think the cheapest gel option is probably goo and like
Carbs gel is the cheapest.
carbs gel.
Yeah.
I've tried it, way too sweet for me. I have a few athletes who use it. That one is a good option. I think dollar to dollar, sometimes candy and goo can be relatively close per calorie. But then again, sometimes with candy, you get a bunch of extra stuff that maybe you don't necessarily want. Candy can have fat in it. Typically doesn't have fiber, but it can, have stuff that like fat that inhibits our digestion, makes it hard to assimilate the fuel during sport. And again, I do think that it's important to practice what you're going to race with.
Yeah.
Mixing in some candy here and there, like in a long race,
Great.
that might actually be really helpful just
Yeah.
to ward off palate fatigue and sweet fatigue and all this stuff that we see. It can just mix things up. Hey, that's nice. That keeps things fresh in a long race. Great. But I would probably, push people away from using that as the primary source. And it's also just like not really that high in carbohydrates. Like you have to eat quite a bit,
Right. Like it's
to
like
get that same
it would
amount
be like
of carbohydrate.
almost a handful of Swedish fish to equal one gel. So the volume in a lot of cases can be different.
Yeah.
Again, I love candy. I will use it in my off season when I'm not training for a specific event.
Just because we're saying it's not as efficient to use that in your racing and training doesn't mean we're stigmatizing it.
Correct.
So just to be clear,
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with eating candy, but
You're right. I think I'm adopting a posture of like, because I host an anti-diet podcast, so often when I say this isn't ideal, because the internet is the internet, I will get like 20 DMs of someone being like, why do you hate candy?
right.
So I think that
Did
I weirdly
Bobby talk to you?
Right. I get like weirdly, like literally we got an email accusing us of taking handouts from Big Sugar, which is so fucking funny. I guess I don't know. Cause like I actually Googled it. I was like, is there a sugar lobby? And there's
sugar
like,
lobby.
there's a lot of actual different lobbies. Cause I was like, who would I hypothetically be receiving these like dark paychecks from? Must have gotten lost in the mail.
Hershey's.
But yes. Yeah. Again, like all of that is to say, I think that, discussions around the cost of fuel are important and worth having, with the caveat that I think a lot of times people are comparing it to a really flawed reference point of paying $0. Because a lot of people come into this sport
Right. It's a good point.
not really fueling and or fueling pretty inefficiently with maybe like one gel an hour or like a couple gels on a run or one gel and a handful of pretzels. And as we progress in our running careers, yes, the cost of fueling efficiently and effectively, or even of doing like the high carb strategies that folks like you and others are using, it does add up. However, I think the thing, like I wrote a blog post for Your Diet Sucks about this, where I actually calculated like how much it would cost, like with the labor of me making gels to make something that is way less effective than what you can buy on the market. And I would be getting paid per hour less than I would make at Wendy's if I wanted in order for the for the economics of it to work. So I always want people to be thinking about like, make sure your reference point isn't comparing fueling well to paying $0. Like think about the potential like negative, like on the extreme side, how much negative health consequences, like getting a stress fracture because you're not fueling, not great. Red S or just like different, concerns there. Then think about like how efficient is this fuel source? Like if you're making your own gels and things, again, if you just love to go get wild and freaky in the kitchen, I empower you. I love knitting. Like, I know that is like extremely not cost effective, but I like to do it. However, with gels, I think there can be real downsides to not eating enough and or, not really nailing the recipe composition and getting in too much fiber, too much fat. And you're also just inherently, unless you have access to a lot of these lab grade materials, you may not be making something that is as well formulated as a lot of these like highly processed, highly engineered, and like kind of perfectly formulated products that are made to be eaten by people who are running. Like getting the sodium concentration is hard. And so, again, if you just like to explore and are curious, that's awesome. I think there's always a little bit of like the diet culture of it all where people are just like, oh, if I can just make it out of sweet potatoes, that's somehow inherently better. And again, with the cost of it all, I think that we have the ability to approach it with nuance and hold in both of our hands. Like, yes, it is getting more expensive, But like, what is your other reference point? Are you comparing it to not fueling well at all? Are you comparing it to fueling with less effective fuel sources? And are you thinking of all the other potential external costs of not fueling effectively?
I don't think people are thinking about those other costs. I don't think it's particularly when it comes to their overall health and their performance. This is kind of like the cost of doing business. Like being involved in sports does have some cost to it. And, your fueling is one of those costs. Your
And
shoes are one of those costs. Your race fees are one of those costs. If you're somebody who wants to race, travel fees to get to said races are part of that cost. Lodging, etc., is all part of that. Some of those things, we're opting into if we
right.
want to participate in certain part aspects of this sport. Like if you want to just run for 30 to 60 minutes every day, you never need to buy a gel your whole life.
Right.
And that's totally fine. But if you do want to do things the right way, you are going to have to look at sports nutrition, I think, because it's the most effective delivery
Yeah.
mechanism for the things you need to perform your best.
Yeah, and I think it's totally fair and valid for people who have different values from me to have different takes. But as someone who really values excellence and competition and who is in like eating disorder recovery and therefore is like inherently skeptical of the diet culture narratives that get tied up in a lot of this, like I think of my body as a Ferrari.
Yeah.
And like I am just not in a place where I'm gonna like skimp on the gasoline.
Totally.
Because then it's like, well, what's the point of doing all the other things? Like,
Let's
why do it?
let's lock this into our listener question because
Ooh.
these are really related.
Oh my God.
And
Yay.
that
Hopefully I didn't
way-
bury the lead. I haven't seen this yet.
Yeah, that way we're not tangenting and we're going to pull it all together here. This athlete, marathon runner who is transitioning to running on the trails, just ran his first 50K. And it is basically the context here is that they're starting to see how I might need to adjust some of my fueling. And so the question is, gels work for me in marathons, but as I race longer distances, should I add real food?
Ooh, unsurprisingly, I'm going to say it depends. I think that if you're going longer in terms of a 50K, not necessarily because...
Well, actually, so I think instead of talking about distance, let's talk time.
But that's
Let's talk time.
So a 50K is not going to be a totally crazy... I mean, a 50K is going to be the time that you will spend running a 50K is going to be closer to a marathon than a 100K or a 100 miler.
Well, yes and no, right? I'm going to challenge you a little bit.
So if you're going to run, so then I guess to put some numbers to it, think of the output that you can sustain for a 7-hour or shorter race. That's going to be higher than the output for something that's like 8 to 14 hours and then 14 to like 35. I would say 14 to 35, that's a long ass race. I would say 8 to 12, that's a long race. I would say something under like 8 hours in that 5 to 7 hour range, you're going to be able to sustain a higher output. But again, there's always going to be terrain considerations. I think if you're doing a 50K, because that people sign up for races by distance and not time necessarily, a shorter, faster ultra, think of your output levels and think of how much time you're going to be out there. You might reach for whole foods if you're going to be power hiking or if you're out there for a longer time. But if it's mostly running and it's a pretty straightforward race, I think sticking to primarily sports nutrition, especially if it works well for you in ultras, is great. And again, there's going to be a ton of individual variability here. And what works for me may not work for you. And what is important that every person does is trial and error for what works for them at different intensity levels.
I think what we see in practice is that races that are greater than 6 hours offer an opportunity to use real foods. If your race is between 6 and 7 hours or 6 and 8 hours, that might have some diminishing returns because it's not that long of a race. But if we are starting to get into those races that do take longer than that, for example, a power of 4, which is a 50K race with over 10,000 feet of climbing, it takes the average person over 8 hours to do that race.
Right.
And those people could presumably be running 3.5 or 4 hour marathons. Like they could be pretty fit, but just because of the terrain and the vert, they're doing double the time
Right.
on that course. So, maybe for an athlete who is pushing, 8 hours in a race, maybe some real food could be beneficial. But again, I do think like thinking about it in those thirds terms, like you kind of were like, okay, 8 hours or less, or 8 to 12, 12 and up. It's like, well, definitely if you're in that 8 to 12, I would say there's probably opportunity and could be helpful to use real food. If you're going beyond that, it's almost mandatory.
I would say like 12 and up, 14 and up. I can do up to 15 hours only gels because I
Yeah.
have a pretty strong stomach, and that's what I practice
I
with
think
very
you've done
religiously.
19 hours with just gels.
I have done 19 hours with
Almost
just
just
gels.
below 12, 20.
Actually, Leadville, I didn't. Actually, at Leadville, I did use potatoes. So, and again, like I try to go for like, I don't want to chew. Like I used to use tater tots. Now I'm like, fuck that. I need everything has to be
Too dry.
squirted,
Too
too
much
dry,
chewing.
too much
Yeah.
chewing. So I'm all about ease of both of like carrying and digestibility. But I think that again, the big things are going to be don't exceed like 8 to 10 grams of protein in a given
Fat.
hour and fat. Still stick with things that are easy for you, fun for you. Make sure you practice them. And, there's nothing better or worse about using whole food. The only thing that's good is what's good for you. So that's what you need to be
Yeah,
paying attention
and maybe
to.
think about like what would your reasonings be for needing to use real food? Are you getting GI distress that could be from other mechanisms? Are you feeling like sweet fatigue? Maybe you need to adjust your like the sports nutrition you use. Like a lot of these brands are now using non-flavored sports nutrition, which offers good options for people who are dealing with sweet fatigue. Understanding, the underlying reasoning
Yeah.
why you might want real food. Are you thinking like that's better, that's healthier? Okay, that's interesting.
You Rich Roll's
Should-
book, and now you're obsessed with avocado sandwiches.
Should think about that. Those don't work. So I think looking at each case is really key, but you could consider it in those thirds, 8 hours or less. If you're above 6, there's possibly opportunity. If you're going over 12, it's pretty much going to be mandatory to mix that in. What we're hearing from Kylie Van Horn, who is our team dietitian and one of the best sports dietitians in the country, is that athletes who are mixing in longer ultras, okay, 12 plus hours, and maybe, and I've even heard from her at times, might be just 8 plus, but athletes who are mixing in more solid foods, not necessarily real foods, could be cookies, could be Pop-Tarts. I wouldn't consider those to be whole foods
The
or real
word
foods.
real, all food is real. It's not imaginary.
Right.
That word means nothing.
So, I think people who are going to go with solid foods, there might be some mechanisms there that we're not exactly sure why, but it helps to ward off GI distress.
Yeah. And again, just make sure what's really important is you identify what works for you and you train with it. The gut is trainable. So, so often the majority of GI issues on race day could have been prevented with more training and more effort in the training cycle. So that would be the thing I would leave people with.
All right, let's get into 5 ways to make this your best season yet.
So convenient that there's just 5 ways.
There's only 5 ways to do any number of things.
So cool how ideas
5.
are just so cut and dry like this.
Next week, it's going to be one way to make this your best season yet.
One thing every runner needs to do.
So
number 7 will blow your mind.
Yes, number 7 is always the best. And here we're going to skip 6 and 7. We're just going to give you 5 because we want you to think about what number 7 is for yourselves. That's called self-efficacy.
DM us what your 7th rule is.
All right. So, for a lot of folks, it's kind of off season. And so like, we really feel like, your best race season doesn't start with a training plan. It starts with a plan for your training.
Yes.
And so we want to help you guys use this time, which, we hear from a lot of athletes around this time, like, I'm not sure what I'm doing next year. So, what should I even be doing in the interim, and how should I plan for the future? Well, this is that call. We're going to talk to you guys about that, help you line it all up, and help you make some smarter decisions so you can peak when it matters most.
Yeah. So, number one, we wanted to talk about building a purposeful transition phase and not stopping running.
Don't stop running.
Step one, don't stop running.
Underline that.
So I think it's really key that like we don't use off season, we use down season or transition season. But I think that if you feel like you need an entire season away from running or a season where your relationship with running changes dramatically, that might mean you need to recalibrate your relationship with running more generally. It's very normal and healthy after like a big race to, yes, have a calculated and calibrated transition recovery phase. But like if you're just like, I want to ski all winter and I expect my race results to look the same, nah, dog.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, so we don't endorse totally stopping running, and we know that a lot of athletes do better maintaining frequency, which is sort of like your fitness anchor, with reduced intensity, less structure, and more play. So keeping up those touch points with running is going to be slightly more important than overall volume because concentration is really, really important. So
I think the point is in the transition phase, and you can think about it as like, all right, you've just accomplished your A race. And now you've moved into this recovery phase. You're starting to feel a bit better. It's time to get some activity going. But we don't quite know what the goals are for the coming season. We need to start getting back towards action. We need to start moving again. We need to start reintroducing the work to the body, because if we don't, we're going to start to detrain. And that's going to be a problem. Getting back to the work is going to be harder. But we also want to do that, keeping in mind that like these transition phases or transition seasons are really important for us mentally and physically, because they are about rest, regeneration, rejuvenation, and mental and physical restoration. I mean, really just getting you back to a point where you feel like, fuck yes, it's time to do the hard work again.
Yeah.
I'm really excited and I want to get going. And sometimes with these transition phases, it can take a little while after an A race to get people back to that point. So, it's about staying in touch with the work that matters while also kind of keeping things loose and flexible.
Yeah. So first thing that this should look like in practice is frequency. We really advocate for keeping 3 to 5 runs a week. Again, caveat, everyone's an individual, because frequency is going to protect your aerobic base and be your best sort of like way of warding off injury. Because if you are going to run, just to put a number of miles to it, 20 miles in a week, it's way better to run those 20 miles across 5 runs than 2, it's from an injury prevention standpoint. Allocating them to only 2 days is just a meaningfully different stimulus, where you're not really going to be protecting your aerobic. You're training different things. So keep the frequency. So even if you are someone that's like, I want to do different activities on the weekends, great. Maybe just get that 20, 30-minute run in before your epic ski day or after your ski day where it makes sense.
Intensity is also important to maintain during these phases. 80 to 90% of runs should stay easy. So pretty much landing on that 80-20 rule that we talk about here, that periodization and polarization. RPE 5 to 6 is a great rule, although some of those runs could be RPE 4 too. If you're feeling tired on a given day, sometimes during transition season, we don't want to push past what feels comfortable mentally because we're looking for that restoration. So keeping things lighter is totally acceptable. I would say even on hills, keep everything conversational. No need to raise, the level of those easy runs. Listen to your body. For total duration, we can cut the time by like 20 to 40% of your peak load and maintain a good percentage of the adaptations you made through the season. We have a lot of flexibility here. Which is really nice. Like some athletes freak out. They don't want to have a transition season because they're so worried about losing what they gain. So like they'll do their transition season and they'll end up overdoing a lot of their workouts and doing more than they need to.
Yeah.
So then we miss the importance of the transition season. And then when we finally start to doing the hard work, oh shit, the athlete's already on their edge.
Yeah.
Fueling and recovery.
Yeah, I think it's just an important note, like you cannot be at peak fitness all the time. That's what a peak means. So inherently, in order to peak and to peak higher next time, you need to have calculated and strategic moments of dialing things back. Like that's hard for me because like as a newer runner or like, I don't have like a very deep athletic history. And so I sometimes feel the pressure to be like always improving. And so it inherently feels like, oh my God, if I'm not like every single month doing the most volume or like
Right.
hitting some metric, it feels on some level bad. However, that is absolutely inherent in the process. So I think another mistake we see is folks will like not be taking care of themselves like athletes in their transition season, a lot of times in terms of not eating enough or eating as intentionally as they should be. Make sure to keep eating like the athlete that you are. Skipping meals in the off season is a great way to lose both power and motivation and make it so that you're not ready to jump back into training when it's time.
One last point that I had on this before we move on to our two way to make the most of this season is stay in contact with intensity. So strides should be part of your transition season. 2 to 3 days a week can help maintain a higher percentage of your VO2 max and kind of act as like a preparation phase, but and like a stepping stone between where you are and harder workouts down the way. And I also like athletes to do mini workouts. So like these are like workouts that are really within your wheelhouse. So you can go out and kind of smash them. You feel really great about yourself after. They don't really push you that hard. They're like really comfortable, but they keep you sharp.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that's really important. And also, just mixing in some different activities, go for a ski, go for a hike or a bike, go climbing. All of that can also help to keep things fresh and exciting.
Yeah. But I think so step 2, I want to talk about designing a long range training plan that sets you up to win. So often, when we first start working with clients, they're like, all right, I have a race in 6 weeks. And it's like, bro, like that is not really enough time for us to achieve anything. Right. Let's talk 6 years here. So thinking about your training year as like a holistic way of I think again, so often training plans are delivered to people in like 6 to 12 week increments. So they start to internalize the idea that that's like how long it takes things to happen. But if you can add up 3 to 4 12-week training blocks, then you can get somewhere really cool. So I think it's important to make sure that we keep in mind the really basic sort of like stress plus rest equals adaptation. And the best training year you can have is one that you can recover from. So we're going to talk about how to zoom out and make decisions that keep you healthy and progressing and mentally fresh. Because if you are burnt out, you're not going to be able to sustain the training long term.
Yeah. And that's so true, right? And we see that a lot, like when an athlete overdoes it, they pick too many A races, they don't pick the right goals for them, then they finish the season and they're totally tapped out and they have to take a full stop break from training, which then sets them back. They end up in one of those periods where they grab a cookie cutter 12-week plan off the internet, try to go accomplish a goal, have a mixed bag of results, feel crappy again, and then start that whole cycle. This is a great way to get yourself out of the cycle. So first step, what successful runners do is they pick somewhere between 1 and 3 A races per year.
Depending on, a lot of factors, but distance, time, and just like what mental, physical, and financial resources do you have to dedicate to the training and racing?
And 1 is totally fine.
1 is great.
Yes, it's great. 2 is great. 3 is great.
2 is also great.
More than that, especially if you're trying to force 300 milers in a year or 3 marathons, like you don't see a lot of great marathoners even doing 3 marathons in a year. That ultra runners, that should tell you something about your training and your racing and your goal selection. Okay. If marathon runners aren't doing 3 marathons in a year, why are you trying to do 300s in a year? Does that make any sense? No, it makes absolutely no sense. So think about this. It's really important.
I do want to push back on that.
Oh, really?
I do think that ultra runners race too much, but they are physiologically different. You don't see pro marathoners. So I did a 100K this summer, and 6 weeks later, I raced a 100 miler. You would not see that in the world of elite marathoning. However, it was 100% valid for my specific race calendar.
Right, because
just to poke a hole in that. Again, I think the message that ultra runners race way too much holds, and the not enough culture, or the I'm racing a 100 miler on every continent every day of the year. Some BS. However, they are just physiologically different, and individuals what I did and what worked for me and that I discussed with my coach was valid and grounded in the available evidence and in
Well,
how my physiology responded to the specific events I did.
and to address that, because I sense something here that's important to you, you did not do a 100-miler 6 to 8 weeks before your 100-miler,
No,
which is
but I did a
something
100. I did a set, like almost a
it's
70-mile race.
60% of your actual A race. And it was done in the context of your training, which we'll talk about. How do we find, like, when we have an A race, one of then everything else we do supports that event.
Right.
So that 100K was a supportive race. If you hadn't done that, you likely would have been doing something crazy like a 8 to 10 hour training run.
Sure.
Instead,
I'm just saying you can't sub in ultra for elite marathon.
No.
Again, I agree with the point. I don't like the metaphor.
If you do think about it, like, the intensity is different in those races, but one is much shorter than the other. So one would wonder why you can't do, 5 or 6 marathons in a year. If why can't you do 4 marathons in a year if you can do 100 in a year?
Well,
just thinking about the
I'm
math
also not a pro runner running 140-mile weeks. So like my recovery after a training cycle of not running 140-mile weeks is pretty different. So like, again, they're not the same thing. However, people do need to cool their jets with the like, I need to race a 100 in every state before I turn 50. Like, be smart, race less for a lot of people.
Here's a way that you guys can look at that in the context of your training. 12 weeks between A races is a good general rule. In an ideal world with athletes, I like 16 weeks, especially if those races are of 100K or greater distance, because that's going to require a lot more recovery and taper time. But that's a really good rule to follow. Like, if you're unsure, can I have 2 A races? Okay, those are the races that I care about most. Those are the races that I'm going all in for. Can I have 2 of those within this window? Well, how much time do you have between? Okay, think about that. If 12 weeks in between, that's a pretty good amount of time. You can recover, you can train a little bit and probably realize some gains, and then you can recover and taper into the race.
I think the thing that's so hard for folks here is they forget, like, they start to have a feeling in between races that starts to guide the training more than physiology does. So after you go do a big event, 50K, 100K, 100 miler, you need significant, again, individual variability, but particularly a longer race, you need significant time to recover. Recover just means getting back to baseline, getting back to the place where your body is ready to absorb more stress in a way that it will actually adapt and improve. After and again, it depends on how advanced an athlete you are, what your history looks like, but, speaking to more beginner intermediate athletes here, like if you're doing a 50 to 100K, it's going to take a couple weeks to get to baseline.
Yeah.
So then you maybe have a couple of weeks to do meaningful training, meaning we introduce stimulus that we expect you to have a reasonable response to that looks like improving and progressing. Then, because again, you're an intermediate or beginner athlete, we have to taper so that you're actually fresh going into your race. So thinking about, like, don't set yourself up so that you're going to have a feeling in between your races and start to try to panic train, while knowing that physiologically you're not actually provoking the responses you need, right? Because like if you're trying to do like a giant long run 2 weeks out from your A race because you're worried that you didn't get a long enough long run in outside of your training event, and you're worried that if you don't do an 8-hour long run before your 100, you're not going to be ready. I think that that's a big caveat, is like set yourself up for emotional and mental success as well. And if you're training with us, you will always be training according to the science and not your vibes.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Zoe, because that's so true. Okay, so here are a couple calendar tips. We've already talked about that A race selection, 1 to 3 races a year, ideally less if those races are quite long, because we have to recover well from those events. Tune-up races. So these are like our B races and our C races for the year. We like athletes to consider this as an option going into a bigger race. The distance, the individual like nature of these events really depends on what you're racing. But maybe an example of this would be a 50K 8 weeks out from 100K. Great opportunity for a high stress weekend. Race that race hard, use it to tune up, take what you learn from that event on with you into the rest of the training before the 100K, and then, have a great race because you did a dress rehearsal before that a race. I think another thing athletes sometimes do is using races as like facilitated training opportunities. Like, I have to do an 8-hour long run. Okay, that's super long. I don't have any aid stations out there. I'm going to sign up for a race that's going to be about 8 hours long. Okay, awesome. You can do a lot of these in the course of a year if you're like actually really like planning these out well. But it matters how hard you're racing. And if you're needing to recover a lot after these races, probably you need to tune it down how hard you're going in those events to make them fit your training better. These would be our kind of our C races.
Yeah. And again, like you'll taper differently for different outcomes as well. But, I think that a lot of times people online, they see that elites and pro athletes are racing quite frequently. And I think it's so important to remember that the people you see online might have really different recovery resources than you. Because like if you work a job and you have a family and you have to invest significant time and energy into those outputs, those are still outputs, whether or not they're training outputs. So don't compare yourself to a flawed set point. I think that also thinking about your mental bandwidth as well. I know that I personally can go to the well 1 or 2 times a year.
Yeah.
Because I ask a lot. Like at Run Rabbit, I ran to the absolute end of myself.
Ugh.
That's not something I can or want to do frequently.
No.
And
or should you?
And I can't, like my life just can't sustain what I need to give to those events. But I'm also not comfortable with not giving my all at those events. So, I think not everyone can go to that place frequently. And to really be cognizant of the risk of burnout, injury, and illness with frequent racing. So the sort of long range framework I want to give people is sort of like big strokes. Far out from the race, you want to train least specific things. So that's speed, VO2 max, general strength. The closer you get to your event, you want to get more specific. So that's training things like terrain, hiking, fueling, race pace, endurance. In the middle, what you're going to want to do is maybe do some things like more tempo and steady state work. Again, just depending on what the specifics of your event is and like what maybe your identified weaknesses are. Again, working with a coach is going to be ideal because even if you train perfectly in a generic sense, how much is it targeting your specific strengths and weaknesses, IDK? I think that occasionally doing shorter, I actually wish that ultra runners did more short races. I think the 25K is extremely underutilized. I wish everyone was racing 15 miles more frequently because I think sometimes people get, and like I'm guilty of this too, of like running fast is really hard. Like I would just straight up rather run 75 miles than 15 in a race context because competitively, 75 miles, I do a little bit better. It's like hard for my ego to like get, beat at like a local 25K, but that is so important for flexing that race muscle, flexing those mental and emotional muscles, and just building the type of fitness that's hard to simulate even with a really focused long run. So I think that those race sims are really great. You also want to refine according to your strengths and weaknesses. So weaknesses, you want to train earlier or further out from your event. So if you're someone that feels like you're not good at climbing or you're not good at like technical stuff, identify and target that earlier in your training. Identify your strengths. Maybe you're really good at running uphill. Maybe you're good at long endurance. You're going to target those later in your training. And the most important part of this is to adapt when life happens. We want to put the principles of physiology over perfection. If you get sick, life happens, family stuff happens, travel, shift things around. Don't throw away the plan. Don't fall off the bandwagon. Don't let one missed day become a week, become 2 weeks, become a training block.
All right. Way 3, avoid the gray zone grind and overtraining masquerading as discipline. Ooh, love this. Very packed here. So the key idea here is running a little too hard too often is the #1 killer of fitness.
Correct.
And a lot of athletes get stuck training at moderately hard effort every day because it feels productive. but it's really not that productive. It's actually really hard to recover from. But it's too easy. It doesn't have quite enough stimulus to force meaningful adaptations.
Yeah. So, I think that like that sort of like 6 out of 10, like 6.5, 7 out of 10 effort if it's not strategic. It might feel honest in the moment, but quietly wear you down. So this is where I really like athletes to retroactively check their RPE against data, like where helpful, like how was your IF? How was your heart rate? Again, I don't want people obsessing about their heart rate in the moment. That's not helpful. And we always want to have some flexibility that takes into account the fact that heart rate is not the most, is like kind of vibey. Even though it seems sciencey, it's pretty vibey. So don't get too married to it. But just make sure that your easy days are in fact actually easy. And it's really hard to do them too easy. You should be able to chat or breathe through your nose. That doesn't mean you should breathe through your, actually nasal breathing is hugely
Don't
overrated.
do
Don't
that.
do it. It's not a thing, but you should feel like you're able to.
Yeah. Very relaxed breathing,
Yes.
and chit-chatty pace.
Yeah.
3 to 4 sentences conversational. Don't be afraid to sing the song lyrics out that you're listening to. Just make up sentences and talk them out loud to yourself. That's one of the things that I do when I'm like making sure that I'm not in zone 3 by accident. Um, and another thing is make sure your hard days are decisively hard.
Yes.
When it's time to work, do the work. If you actually run easy on your easy days and pay attention to that, you will be able to show up in a more meaningful way for those higher stress days, and you're going to get more out of the training as a result of that. And I can't underline that more
Yeah.
because that's, something that I think every athlete works on over time and over their career. Um, it's always a work in progress. How can I get more out of my
Yeah.
hard days? How can I be more intentional on my
Yeah.
easy days?
So if you feel like you're not hitting the paces you want to be hitting in workouts, or workouts feel hard, or you're feeling anxiety or dread around workouts, a lot of times that can indicate that you're just burning the candle a little bit too much on your easy days, and you need to intentionally pull back there before you can fully realize your potential on the speed piece of things.
Yeah, like in just like your races, you only get a handful of opportunities to really dig deep
Uh-huh.
in a training block. And I think using that strategically is, a product of growing awareness and experience because you're, repeating these training blocks and these builds a lot over time, and you're going through different seasons. You're not ideally just doing one training season. But using it as an opportunity, really seeing where do those moments matter? Can I get a little bit more out of myself today? And if you're feeling plateaued, it's not always because you're doing too much. Sometimes it can be because you're not addressing the underlying like intentions behind things. It might not be because your training isn't good enough. It might be because you're not doing your training in the way that it's meant to be done.
Yeah. Um, In our household, we call it DTM, which are short for doing too much. So some signs that you might be DTM are if you're having issues with sleep, if you're having issues with mood regulation, fatigue, irritability, sometimes even depressive symptoms can be a sign of energy deficiency or under recovery, frequent niggles. If there's always like something that kind of hurts and it's pinging, ponging, and rounding in your body, a lot of times that might mean an energy mismatch. If you're also just feeling disconnected from your training, that's something that folks should pay attention to, and means that we should make like tactile, like material changes to your training. If you're noticing that your pace or HR, your heart rate doesn't respond to effort, that's something worth paying attention to. If you're getting sick frequently, could mean that you have children that are in daycare or that you are DTM. And if
DTM.
every run, like the fact of training is that a lot of runs are going to feel like a grind. That's just part of it. But if every single run feels like a grind, that's likely an indication that we need to fix something at a really essential level.
Yeah, dial your training back for a couple weeks, add some extra rest days, make sure your runs are truly easy when they're supposed to be, make sure you're eating and sleeping like it's your job. Hit those big percentages. Don't go for the hacks, guys. Just stick to the
Yeah.
stuff that is tried and true.
All All right, step 4 is master the right workouts for the right season. Your training shouldn't be random or scattershot. The best progress in terms of like running seasons happens when the workouts match the phase you're in. And that's why it's really important to lay out a clear structure in your training. So every run that you do should have a purpose: recovery, endurance, adaptation, and you should really think tangibly about like what the intention behind every run is. And that's a great way to remain motivated even on the days where the intention is recovery.
Right. Like, don't worry about having like a fancy workout that keeps you mentally engaged and looks flashy and is like this cool combo of different things. Like, stick to the high percentages, stick
Yep.
to the basics and what you know really works, and channel your energy there at the right times. That's how you're going to get the best bang for your buck and experience the most progress.
Yep. So we're not going to spend too much time on the types of runs because we've talked about that a lot in other podcasts. So yeah, what do you want to hit on here?
Let's just talk about maybe what like a sample training week might look like for folks. So I think this one here is a good one to go off of. So most athletes, a lot of athletes we coach, they're going to rest on Mondays. It's a great day for recovery and mobility.
Mobility doesn't mean going to the gym and hitting it hard or
No.
doing like a power yoga class. It means just checking in, noticing where you're holding tension in your body and addressing it with some very relaxed dynamic movement.
Yes, very dynamic, very relaxed, a lot of foam roller, a lot of stretching. Tuesday, great way to start the week is just with a 60-minute or less recovery run. Add in a few strides for that neuromuscular stimulus, and that helps you prepare for your Wednesday workout. Wednesday is a very typical workout day for a lot of athletes. Maybe a sample day is 30 minutes at steady state or 7 out of 10 RPE on race specific terrain. And then afterwards, you cool down, have some protein shake, and you do your strength maintenance. So making sure you're still getting that strength and concentrating your strength work with a day of the week that's already high stress. Thursday is great for another endurance run. So a run more than 60 minutes. I wouldn't typically add strides to this run if you've done the steady state run on a Wednesday. So like you don't want to add too much stress, concentrate too much stress when you might be fatigued from that workout. But if you aren't doing a workout on Wednesday, Thursday could be another good day to add some of those strides and really build in that neuromuscular emphasis to your training. Friday, again, rest or maybe some cross training like hiking, biking, something to keep your aerobic system activated, but we're taking the stress off the musculoskeletal system. Low impact work is best on Fridays. And then Saturday, we go into our other very high stress day of the week, and we do our long run. So ideally, that long run is something greater than where you feel comfortable. So if you've been doing 2-hour long runs for the last 4 weeks, something more than 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours.
With the caveat that if you're in like a VO2 max builder, really trying to focus on speed, you don't need to be doing a 6-hour long run because that is going to sort of undermine, it's going to be detrimental to the speed development.
You're not going to want to do
You
that.
can't both be optimizing for speed and endurance at the same, or like longer endurance at the same time. We're always doing some aerobic building and endurance.
If you're close to your race, maybe 12 weeks out, that long run should be done on race specific terrain. Again, the workout also, if you're within 8 to 12 weeks from your race, it's great to do that on race specific terrain, because the more specific you are leading into your race, the more likely it is you'll be prepared for the demands of your race. And then Sunday is another great opportunity for recovery run, 60 minutes or less, cross training, or another long run, depending on what phase of training you're in. You can add some strength and mobility in after that session to round out the week before your rest day.
Yep. I think it's important to note that if you like, the best training is the training you can recover from. You can have the most perfect like plan ever on your schedule, but if you're not able to make the space to adapt to it, to eat enough, to sleep enough, to rest enough, to give yourself the resources you need, it doesn't matter what workouts you do. It doesn't matter how you concentrate stress. You will not be able to adapt and absorb. So make sure that whenever we increase training, we're able to increase our ability to absorb that load as well.
All right. Way number 5 here to make the most of your upcoming season. Plan your recovery like it's part of training.
Yeah. Great
It
little
is.
segue there. Yes.
It is.
Yeah. Fitness isn't about what you can do. It's about what you can recover from. A lot of us could go out and do some extremely sexy workouts and long runs, but it doesn't matter for shit if you can't recover from it. So after any big race or any big training block, recovery isn't optional. It's where the adaptations physically happen. It's not a vibe. It's not warm fuzzies. It is when the shit happens. So again, acknowledging that your body doesn't know miles, it knows stress, and managing that stress is the difference between progress and plateau. And as you improve as you build in your training, you're able to do more mileage, you're able to do more intensity, whatever that looks like. Make sure that you're also thinking about how am I upping my recovery game in tangible ways as well, because just vibing and saying, I'll do a shake, not enough.
I think this is where the rubber really meets the road when we look at the difference between like beginning and intermediate runners and advanced and elite runners.
Yeah.
The more advanced and elite you are, typically the more comfortable you are with those recovery periods and the more you invest in those recovery periods. When I see beginner athletes and intermediate athletes or mid-pack runners often have the most fear around those recovery periods. They
don't take it seriously,
Right.
and they're like, I'll do bike rides and walks and hot yoga and like just cramming a bunch of random shit into recovery.
DTM. And in those, so what I always try to do in my coaching is really emphasize that your recovery is your training and that it's actually more important than the training you do, because if you don't have that recovery, the training doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So, make sure that after a run, you eat carbs, protein, you replenish electrolytes, you hydrate, and prioritize sleep. I think that there can be a place for active recovery, but that's really only for folks who like absolutely have their shit dialed. I think a lot of times beginners reach to active recovery because it feels easy and they're maybe not totally in touch with like how to mediate their effort. But again, that's something I always want people to be cautious of. I feel that active recovery is more of an advanced tool for people who
Absolutely.
are consistently absorbing and adapting to their training load.
And coming off a race, those first 48 hours, it's really going to be critical to eat well.
Have a game plan.
Yeah.
Don't expect to get to the finish line of your race and then YOLO it.
Right. Have that protein shake waiting for you at the finish line. Have like that, know what restaurant you're going to go to that's close by, know what you're going to get for dinner. Try to line that stuff up ahead of time, because when you're tired, it's hard to think about those things. And then it's easy to get like set off course. Basal metabolic rate remains very high for at least up to 7 days after an ultra. And it's especially risky for 100-mile athletes to not eat enough in the 5 to 7 days after a race. Your activity level goes down, so we think we don't need to eat as much, but our resting metabolic rate remains very, very high.
Your body doesn't just like reset every time you sleep.
So we've got to keep fueling, and we really need to limit our activity so we're not continually putting ourselves in a deficit. After 2 weeks or so, you can start to really rebuild to that normal volume. Depends a little bit on race distance, how hard you go out there, and some of those nuances that we've talked about before. If you're really doing it right, you're going to wait when like things feel like exciting, when you're really stoked to step it up again. That's when you're ready to start doing the work, and you're going to be comfortable in that space between recovery and pushing yourself in workouts. You're going to be comfortable in that transition season that we've talked about, staying with it, touching base with the training, but not feeling like you need to be all in until it's really time, and your body and your mind telling you that it is.
So again, I think it's really important to iterate that your best season isn't built from one really good big week or one really sexy training block. It's built from thousands and hundreds and a ton of good decisions. So right now is the time where you can commit to making this your best year ever. Don't wait till the new year. Don't wait till the Hard Rock Lottery opens. Commit right now, wherever you're listening to this. Pick your A races, add your tune-ups, sketch out your long-range plan, talk with your coach, set your weekly frequency goal, and most of all, keep your training simple, consistent, and deeply intentional.
Yeah. I love it. If you're thinking about your upcoming season, you don't know how to train for it, we offer consultation calls.
We do.
And I just did one with an athlete earlier today. It was super fun. He's racing the Gorgeous Waterfalls 30K, and we kind of got into the details of his plan. And I think he's going to be really set up for success. I love doing that with people. We're here.
We do one-off consultations. Like if you're not totally sure that you're ready to commit to full-time coaching, that could work for you.
Yeah, come on. We'd love to hear from you guys. And also, hot or nots.
Yeah, we need more hot or nots.
Yeah, get involved, get in the conversation, join our Foothills tier. Great way to support the podcast, get involved with the community. And reach out to us, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com, microcosm-coaching.com. We'll see you guys next week.